If there's one thing quilters love to do, it's give thoughtful gifts. But we don't always have time to make quilts for all the people in our lives. So in this episode, I'm gonna give you some great gift ideas, show you how to do the quilt as you go method, and as a bonus, I'll show you how to use the scraps to make a little something for yourself. So let's get to it. I'm often asked about the quilt as you go technique, and it's a great one to learn because it allows you to piece and quilt a project at the same time, or as you go. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to use that technique to create some fun and cute table toppers. First, we're going to learn how to make this table runner using the quilt as you go method. I've incorporated just a little bit of piecing to add a little bit of pizzazz to it, but as a bonus, it's double-sided. Now, I'm no interior designer, but to me, that's awesome. It can change with the seasons or be more versatile in my decor. Then we're gonna learn how to make coasters and how to use the scraps to make a mug rug. It's gonna be so much fun, so let me get the fabric and let's start cutting. I'm going to be using these panels for the projects in this video, and I designed them with some of my recent fabric prints, and I designed the panel as an alternative to pre-cuts. You could cut the strip into 5-inch squares like charm packs, or you could cut it in 2.5-inch strips like jelly rolls. You could use it as a quilt top or a quilt backing, and it's going to make lovely projects for our video. I'm also going to include a lovely accent fabric that's going to pop off of that table runner. It's going to be so cute. So first, let's cut these panels in half, and I'll show you how it's going to come together. Now this panel features prints from Flag Day, a patriotic inspired collection. I'm just going to fold it in half a couple times and then cut off the fold to give me 2 pieces. This one is going to act as the backing of my table runner, and I'm going to set the other one aside for right now. I'll show you what I'm going to do with that in a moment. Now I'm going to repeat with my other panel as well. And I designed this panel with prints from my Stay Wild fabric collection, a nature-inspired theme with nice soft colors. And I love it so much, I'm going to chop it in half. Now I'm going to cut each of these sections into 2.5-inch strips, but I designed them so that they're 5.5 inches wide. That's going to give you a little bit of wiggle room to get the cuts that you need. And now that I have my strips cut, I'm going to cut them all in half. I'm going to repeat with the other panel and then cut some of my accent fabric, and then we'll be ready to start putting together our table topper. I'm going to cut the accent fabric into strips and then cut those into rectangles. Now that I have everything cut out, I'm going to go ahead and piece these strips for the top of our table runner. The quilt as you go technique usually incorporates strips that you piece and flip over. And to make it just a little bit more interesting, add a little bit of pop of color, I'm going to add a pieced component to it. So I'm going to take my strips that I cut in half and the rectangles I cut out of the accent fabric, and I'm going to place them right sides together like this. Now, because I don't trust myself just to eyeball it, I'm going to mark a diagonal line from corner to corner like this, and I'm going to sew right on this line. Since I want to make the bonus project at the end, I'm going to mark another line about a 1/2 inch away. I'm going to sew on both of those lines. Then I'm going to carefully cut in between those 2 sewn lines. This little guy is going to eventually be a cute half-square triangle, but I'm not going to deal with it right now. I'll come back to that later. Instead, I'm going to focus on this strip. So I'm going to press it open. Then I'm going to take a second strip of the same fabric and place it right sides together. It's optional, but I'm going to draw a quick line from corner to corner. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sew on the line and then trim about a 1/4 inch outside of it. Now I'm going to repeat that with half of the strips to make more of these strips. But to make it go faster, I'm going to do some chain piecing, and I'm going to use diagonal seam tape instead of marking the lines. I've used diagonal seam tape before. I love how it gives me a quick reference line and I don't have to do any marking. But now that I have these all sewn, I'm going to trim, press, and repeat on the other side. You can help me. And don't forget to save all those little pieces if you're going to make that bonus project. And now it's time for the second side. Again, making sure I have the same fabric on both sides. It's going to go the same way as I put that accent fabric, and I'm going to do the same thing. Stitch, trim, and iron. Now that I have the first set of strips done, I'm going to repeat with the second half, doing the same thing except in the opposite direction. So when I lay out my strip, I'm going to place my accent fabric like this, facing the opposite direction, but I'm going to do the same thing, stitch, trim, and press. And I'm going to repeat with both sides until I have strips that are mirror images of the first set. This diagonal seam tape is super handy. All I have to do is align the corners of my fabric with that red line, follow it all the way through. So I have my 2 sets of strips finished, and as you can tell, they're going in opposite directions. This is going to make it look really cool when I'm done. Now I'm going to gather the rest of my supplies so I can start quilting as I go. So first of all, I have the backing. So you remember I cut this earlier. Now you can find the panels and all the supplies I show you in this episode. You can find them on my website. You just check the link in the description box below. And what's great about this panel is it makes it look like it's pieced. And this is the reversible component of our table runner. So I'm going to place that right sides down, just like I would for a quilt. And I'm going to get a piece of batting. It's a great way to use up batting scraps. I have a long arm, and so I have plenty of these laying around. But I'm going to get me a piece of batting that's nice and long. I'm going to lay it on top of my backing. But as I piece the strips onto the batting, it's also going to quilt it. So that's where the Quilt As You Go name comes. So taking one of my strips, I'm going to align it on the very top edge, and I have a little bit of extra on each side so that I can audition where I want it to go. I'm going to place it right there. Looks great. Then I'm going to grab a second strip that has the angle or the accent fabric going in the opposite direction, and I'm going to kind of audition where I want it to go. Now, of course, I want this strip to cover the batting, so I don't want to move it too much to one side, but I definitely have a little bit of wiggle room as to where I want that to be placed. And I think that looks lovely. Now I'm going to flip them over and place them right sides together like this, just like I would if I were actually piecing this without quilting it. And I'm going to sew my seam through all the layers right along this edge. Now to keep it all from shifting though, I'm going to pin it in place. Then I'm going to take it over my sewing machine and sew from edge to edge. Now I know this is looking a little weird, but this is where it becomes the Quilt As You Go. As I take out my pins, I'm going to fold just the top strip over. And there you can see now it's sewn and quilted all at the same time. It's amazing. But I need to make sure I press each strip in place as I go. Don't skip this step. It's important. It's going to make the whole thing look much better. All right, now I'm going to repeat that with another strip. So I can play with the color placement, I could play with the direction, and here what I want to show you is there's some really fun options you can create with this. It's like a choose your own adventure while you quilt as you go. Well, something like that. So as I place my next strip on there, if I wanted to, I could line up that accent fabric and get a really neat chevron look. Okay, I'm not going to do that because then I have to worry about matching seams, and let's be honest, I'm not really the most precise piecer, so I'm going to definitely offset that. I could also play around with the color placement. Instead of alternating or doing random colors, I could place 2 colors together. It really is whatever you think looks best. But I'm going to alternate, switching up the colors. Once I'm sure I have the proper placement that's perfect for me, I'm going to put them right sides together again. I'm going to pin it in place because that fabric will shift, and then sew my 1/4 inch seam along the edge. Now I chose to use the Stay Wild fabric as the pieced portion of my table runner, but I could have flipped it around and did the same with the Flag Day. That's what makes it so fun. Now you can see it starting to come together, and I just want to take a quick peek on the back and show you what it's looking like on the back. So it's looking like it's pieced. It has this little bit of quilting, just gorgeous. I'm going to keep working my way doing the same thing. So my table runner is finished. I've added all my strips the same way that you saw. What I love about it is when you turn it over, it's all quilted because I was quilting as I went. Quilt as I go, however you want to say it. Now it's time to trim it. And this is one of my favorite things about this technique because you can trim it to the size you want it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it and I'm going to trim it flush with the edge of my batting so that I have my perfect table runner. I don't know why I find trimming so oddly satisfying. It was all crazy looking and now it's all nice and neat and trimmed up, which isn't like me. I'm not usually all about keeping things nice and neat, but for some reason I really like the trimming. Once it's all trimmed up, then you can add the binding and your table runner is finished. Make sure you pick a binding that looks good on both sides because you're going to see it when you flip it over. And just like that, you have a double-sided table runner that lets you go from spring to summer just like that. It's the perfect thoughtful gift for someone. Now if you remember, I still have half of that panel left. So for our next table topper, we're going to turn this into cute, easy-to-piece coasters. So I'm going to cut this panel up into 5-inch squares, but to make the cutting more efficient, I'm going to cut out my strips, stack the strips on top of each other, and then cut them into squares. So I'm playing what I like to call rotary cutter roulette. I have stacked all 9 of them and I'm going to see if I can cut through them. I'm pretty sure it's a new blade, but it might not be. We're going to find out pretty quickly if it works or not. Oh, sometimes I crack myself up. I think it worked. Look at that. Perfect. So I'm going to cut these up into 5-inch squares, or really you could use any size that you want. I just feel like that's a good size. And if you don't have the panel, you could use your scraps that you have laying around. And it's the perfect thing for those fabrics that you have that are really fun, but you just don't have the right project for them. You know, the one you bought because you were at a weak moment and you're like, oh, it's glittery, it's sparkly, but I don't know what to do with it. You could use those. All right, then I'm also going to need some batting scraps. Now I happen to be a long arm quilter, so I have plenty of pieces of batting laying around. Perfect use for that. I'm going to cut them a little bit bigger than my fabric squares. So I'm going to take my squares, my batting pieces, and sew them together. Coasters are quick and fun little gifts, and they really add a pop of color to your table. A nice little table topper. So I have my 5-inch squares and I have my scraps of batting, and what I'm going to do is pick out 2 of the squares to make 1 coaster. And I could mix and match the 2, or I could make them the same, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to make them different. That way, you know, you have 2 options. And I'm going to place them right sides together on top of the piece of batting. So I have my 3 layers right here, my batting and my 2 squares right on top of each other. Then I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and sew around all 4 sides, but I'm going to leave a little bit of an opening so I can turn it right side out. To help protect the seam though, I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and the end. So I'll take a few stitches, back stitch, and then work my way around all 4 sides. And then once I'm finished, I can trim off that extra batting. This is such an easy gift to make, especially if you have a young sewer in your life. Imagine giving this to their teacher or their grandparents knowing that they made it themselves. I'm going to trim off those little corners just so that they lay a little bit flatter once I turn it out. But I got to be very careful. You don't want to cut into the actual stitching because then you'll have a problem. And now all I have to do is turn it inside out. And then to get the corners nice and sharp, I'm going to use the purple thang. That might sound like my Missouri accent coming out, but it's not. That's actually the name of it, the purple thang. And it's plastic, so it won't poke through your little coaster, but it's also sharp enough that's really going to poke out those corners. You could also use a chopstick or maybe a blunt pair of scissors. Just be careful you don't poke it all the way through. But if you do, it's not the end of the world. I may have poked out a few corners in my time. Once I have that finished, I'm going to press it nice and flat because I'm going to add a top stitch around it to give it that finished look. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold in the fabric and use that ironing to kind of keep it tucked in so that I don't have to come back and hand sew that. So then using a hot iron, just going to press it nice and flat. Of course you could leave it just like this and hand stitch that closed, but this little top stitching that we're going to add around the outside is really going to give it just that finished look. So there I have my folded edges nice and pressed. So I'm going to take it to a sewing machine and stitch like 1/8 of an inch away from the outside all the way around. And this is a great opportunity to play around with some fun different threads. And I'm going to use gray Aurifil just to do that top stitching, but if you really wanted to add a pop of color, you could play around with shiny threads or contrasting colors. I bet that would look great too. And there I have my first finished coaster, nice and double-sided, showing off my different fabrics. And they're so fun to make in different color combinations, and they go together really quickly. As you can see, I've got all my different colors here. And then what I could do is just grab a couple of them, tie them up with a nice piece of fabric, and you have a perfect little gift. You could tuck a little card in there. And I think it's just a great, thoughtful gift to hand out. But we're thinking of other people so much, sometimes we want to make a little something for ourselves. Well, let's pull out those scraps that we had left over from the first project and make a little mug rug. If you saved all those little half square triangles that you had left over from the first project, you can square them up all the same size and make yourself a cute little mug rug. You can see the accent fabric popping out real nice, and then just the little bits of the coordinating prints. So all I have to do is trim them to the right size, line them up, sew them into rows, and then sew the rows together, and you'll have a cute little mug rug that you can keep for yourself. At that point, you could either turn it into a coaster, or you can make it a little bit bigger, put some binding on it, and have a bigger mug rug. You know, for your popcorn and your piecing potion. Once I have my table toppers finished, the last thing to do is to put them together. These table toppers are a really fun way to use the Quilt As You Go technique to make some thoughtful gifts. I love the idea of the accent fabric creating just a little bit of a different pattern, and the fact that they're double-sided makes them so much more versatile. Plus, you get the benefit of looking like such a thoughtful person with such an awesome gift. Imagine taking a cute little bucket and tucking it in your table runner, maybe a bottle of wine and some coasters. I mean, who wouldn't love to get a gift like that? And you could give it different themes. If you had some winter fabric, you could do hot chocolate and marshmallows, or maybe a back-to-school theme. And as a bonus, you have a little bit extra for another special person in your life. Here you go, Angela. Oh, thanks, I shouldn't have. You're welcome. It's crazy to think that all these came from just these two panels, and I like to call them the uncut pre-cuts, because you can turn them into 5-inch squares or 2.5-inch strips. Now, don't forget, I have the panels and the pattern available on my website, but one lucky viewer is going to win both the panels and the pattern. All you have to do is leave a comment below telling me what last-minute occasion you would make these for, and I'll announce a winner on social media next week. Speaking of next week, I'll be back next week with another episode of The Midnight Quilter. Until then, happy quilting!